This is sort of a word from your sponsors, as Neil mentioned that the Digital Social Research Programme is one of the sponsors of the event. But rather than talking about digital social research, which is something I might talk about to a social science audience in particular, I want to pick up on this whole collaborations theme, because what I'm really talking about here is, as was created as a wonderful typo, but lovely in the agenda yesterday, social digital research. Right? Really, that's what everyone's doing, it's digital research, and we're putting the social into that. So my compromise title now is research that's both digital and social. Just to mention something about the programme, and I should say that the coordinator of this programme, funded by ESRC, is Megan Meredith Lobe, who's sitting in the second row here, and is one of the event team today. And is also running simultaneously at least one other workshop today. It was 3 or 4 years ago that we took over what had been known as the E-Social Science Programme, which had been very successfully set up by University of Manchester and featured a number of projects around the country. And you could count those on the fingers of 2 hands at that point in time. Now we have, Megan, how many projects?
About 50.
About 50 projects around the country. And we're just coming to the end of the period of the programme where we've been funding various activities. In fact, this month is the last month where we're initiating new things, but we're keeping the community going. And this kind of weather map just shows the growth of activity. And what's quite significant is, and one of the reasons we changed from calling it e-social science to digital social research, is that when things were just called e-social science, like when the UK e-science programme called things e-science, then people funded by that programme knew they were doing it. But actually everyone's doing it. There's loads of really good work going on out there which is indistinguishable from what was funded under e-science or e-social science. So what we did with digital social research, following the theme of this event as well, is embrace the broader community of everyone who's practicing digital methods in their social science research. So that's one story, and I could give you a whole talk on how digital methods can be used in social science, in particular with new forms of data, all the new kinds of data that social scientists are embracing, from Twitter to administrative data to biodata. But really today I want to talk about it the other way around, and talk about how the way research is conducted today is actually highly social, and why a meeting like this is actually absolutely essential to that process. So that's my message. So that started by me saying, how is research conducted today? And I've already mentioned the new forms of data now. If we go back a few years, a standard opening data deluge slide would have been a picture of some experiment in CERN for the Large Hadron Collider. And we would have talked about all those terabytes of information that seemed daunting at the time. But the point is now every discipline is in academia and outside academia, as research is occurring across business and industry, and citizens alike, are embracing this data deluge and this data challenge. So it is already inherently very much a social thing. This picture rather nicely captures the whole deluge thing going on there. It's a picture that Ian Foster uses and was annotated by Christine Baldwin, who's a writer on digital scholarship. And we've seen, and this will be familiar to many of you, many accounts of the change in research practice in recent years that goes with this data-centric, data-intensive working. So a very eloquently titled paper here. Here is the evidence now. What's the hypothesis? The complementary roles of inductive and hypothesis-driven science in the post-genomic era, by Doug Kell, a biologist from Manchester who's currently just finishing his period of office as the chief exec of the BBSRC. Important commentator there. You should read Doug's blog, which is excellent. And then more extremely, and before I put this next image up, I have to always say I don't necessarily subscribe to this view, is the end of theory. So the scientific method is now obsolete because we have all this data, and we can take a more statistical approach. Discuss. And then, of course, Microsoft came along with their 4th paradigm book, a tribute to Jim Gray, talking about data-intensive research and as the 4th paradigm of science. And that's been very important, and I'm sure you've come across 4th paradigm events, and I have actually 5 of these books in my office, so I'm up to 20 paradigms in my office. But when you talk to humanities audiences and some social science audiences, they're very confused by the number 4, because starting with the data is actually what they've been doing for years and predating all this e-science and cyber infrastructure stuff. So my sort of comment on all of this to set the scene is this is naive in some ways, it's trivial, it's a caricature, but actually really useful for discussion. And it's a picture of the world of research. And actually this is a very useful picture. I've used this in the strategy for the Oxford Research Centre, I've used this in the strategy for the Digital Social Research Programme, I've used this for new things that are starting up now, I've used it for Framework 8 stuff. It captures it quite nicely. So on the y-axis we have Moore's law, we have the increasing number of cores, big data, big machines, big iron, and on the other axis we have what would logically therefore be called big society, but I try not to use that phrase in the UK because it has other semantics, so it's the more people axis. And that stuff down on the bottom left, where we've been working, where computer science has been working for a very long time, is still very important. So I'm not saying we don't want to be down there. I've just flown in on a plane. I don't want air traffic control done with Twitter. Okay, it's fine. I'm happy with that as superficial computation. However, the really interesting space, I think, is the top right, and let me explain why. What we saw with e-science, e-infrastructure, cyber infrastructure, is quite a lot of investment in that infrastructural piece, and in some cases an increasing effort to try to get more and more people to engage with that e-infrastructure, and some concern about a sort of build it and they will come approach, which didn't always result in people coming along. At the same time, not through a big funded program like e-science or cyber infrastructure, we saw just people, citizens, researchers, whether they're PhD students or anywhere in their careers, increasingly working digitally, because that's what you do, because you're in a digital world, not because you're carefully selecting the tools for your research, but because you're using the web, because you're surrounded by the technology, because you have the smartphones, because the data is becoming available. So there's a whole sort of online science thing going on, and actually you can almost identify sometimes two separate communities. You can see the sort of e-sciencey community on the left, and you can see the online science. In fact, there have been events called Science Online for the other one, and I was quite worried that these are going to get separated, and the people on the right there are going to start reinventing the stuff on the left. And part of my ambition has been to keep these communities together. We ran last September here in Oxford the Digital Research Conference, which absolutely addressed bringing those two areas together. So I'm very interested in that. Instead of fourth paradigm, I'm calling it fourth quadrant, and I'm happy with my enumeration there. And in another talk, we would discuss where the arrows go in the fourth quadrant, because you can say, well, there's a ceiling on the number of people that we're going to ever use in this picture, but Moore's law seems to go on forever, and that's an argument in favour of an arrow going that way. It's a kind of more automation, more assistance of humans type axis, which actually I probably believe in. Other people say, no, actually we've got a long way to go with the more people axis yet, so we should focus on that one. Anyway, I think that's the interesting space, and that's the social and the digital, and that's what we're talking about today. As I said, I've used this slide in a number of different contexts, and one of them was very recently in a college very close to here, in a JISC event involving European colleagues looking at the research technologies. And this is a very important notion in this collaborations workshop, because many of you are research technologists. These are people who are working between the specialist researchers, but also might be part of specialist support, but are sort of above the level of normal support. So there's a really interesting territory which is being acknowledged as very, very important to science, to research. It's important that it's acknowledged, it's important that you have career progression routes in those roles, and there's quite a lot of discussion about that at the moment, which is really, really important. So another question is, where in this picture do those very important people, i.e. you, fit? That's something you can also reflect on. I like this picture, actually. This comes from a colleague, Ian Buchan at the University of Manchester, and captures rather nicely two ends of a spectrum about how research is done. So if you talk to the big data evangelists at the moment, velocity, volume, variety, veracity, all these V words, it's not just sort of volume of data, it's volume of sales. I mean, they're very keen to sell you very large amounts of equipment and big data centres and services, and that's a sort of a model on the left, the big data elephant in the data room. But on the right is what we do as researchers and what researchers do in order to take science and research forward, which is much more this notion of the Sensemaking Network. And The words here were for a different audience, but it's pictures. Words are for a social science audience. But I'm sure the notion of expertise, data, models, and narratives would be the things that exchanges in the network are important. So you have people, you have computers, and you've got these things that are being exchanged. And that's actually how we do analytics. How are we going to scale to dealing with the analytics of large volumes of data simply by turning up the knobs for numbers of people and numbers of sort of machines? But rather, you also have to look at the methods, the sharing of the methods, whether that's training and capacity building, or whether that's how we conduct our large-scale collaborative research. It's the picture on the right, which is about collaboration. So as the Digital Social Research Programme has reached this point of sort of 3 or 4 years old, there's some interesting themes going on that I just wanted to mention because they're relevant today. One of them is called social machines. This is the idea that instead of always thinking about a layer of machines, and then a layer of people called users who come along and use them, which is the traditional sort of computer science view of the world, I don't think we talk about designing systems that way anymore. If you look, and we don't even talk about interacting or analysing systems in that way, we actually think about these socio-technical systems. We design a website for a set of users. We do our perpetual beta Web 2 piece with a set of users. We use our agile methods with a set of, So always we're designing or co-designing with a community in mind. And then, here's a bunch of examples which range from sort of citizen science to Mechanical Turk to online communities like Ushahidi. So it's very much thinking in terms of the socio-technical systems and the interactions between those. When we go into a new project now, for which you might be involved in producing software, what we're doing is designing a social machine, effectively, that's going to interact with the other ones that are already out there. You say, well, we're going to use this website, and we're going to use this website, and we're going to create this website, for example, in order to do that. And I've got lots of stories about those we can talk about later. Another theme that's come out very strongly and is deeply social is the notion of responsible innovation. Now, this is, traditionally you might have come across ethics committees, and they're often seen as groups of people who are focused on the process of research. And the thing about responsible innovation is it also focuses on the product and the purpose of the research. So it's a broader discussion, perhaps a deeper, more nuanced discussion about responsibility. Interesting additional debate to that. Firstly, what does that mean in the context of masses of automation? When the computers are doing the research for you, who has responsibility? Another is there a responsibility to innovate? That's a good topic for discussion in a while later. Then finally, a lot of discussion at the moment about the artifacts that are shared in that sensemaking network to have really effective, innovative, transformative research as we go forward. So this is how things haven't changed. So 350 years ago, in 1665, the Royal Society launched the first journal. Up until then, scientists had been wanting to record what they're doing so they could prove they were the discoverer, but that principle of this was about open innovation. It's about sharing the research results and the evidence that supports them in a community. Now you have a PDF that looks pretty much the same, and there's a lot of discussion about moving beyond the PDF. I've just come from the Beyond the PDF meeting in Amsterdam, and one of the things there, for example, bringing software into the world of the research record and of the literature, it's part of the software sustainability piece. So SSI has been involved with the Journal of Open Research Software, for example. And to close, I was sort of provoking a few things at Beyond the PDF. This is my... I wrote a paper dated 2065, which is the history of the paper, and the demise of it in 2030, which we can discuss later. But this is one of the things in the conclusion of my teasing piece, which was just sort of notice here. It is like data's just been discovered. Everyone's talking about data. It's good. It's really important. I'm glad we have research data management policies and plans in our institutions, and things like the Research Data Alliance have just been created. They met this week as well. But all these other things, like the software, are part of that sense-making network and part of the sustainability and part of resolving the paradox of how research funding leads to sustainable infrastructure and ongoing open innovation. And I think the software's got two roles in this. One is it's one of those artifacts that really has to be part of that discussion. But the other is that the open source software community, in many ways, is an exemplar of a successful social model for innovation and for taking things forward, which is open and transparent and sharing and does all those things we want to do in terms of releases of software rather than publications of research articles. It deals with all the handling of licensing. We're actually very mature with it as a sort of socio-technical system in the software business compared to science in many ways. So I actually think that we have two things to do here. One is to make sure software is seen as a first-class citizen in discussions, and that research technologists are seen as first-class citizens, but also that science and research and the process of science and research learns from what we're doing in software. So those are my take-homes. Digital research is social research. Software and research technologists are all first-class citizens. Think about those social machines things. I think we're designing social machines. How we construct and design those is the shape of research today. And I think that we have something to tell everyone else. So that's my digital, social, and social digital contribution today. I have a really good workshop. I'm around all day. Megan's here both days, and we're looking forward to discussing all these things with you. Thank you very much.